Hello everyone, welcome back to another edition of the Velvet Lounge Life, and today we are going to discuss Colt plastic division buttons that were made by the Colt Firearms organization. They obviously, like other companies, created different divisions to work with the signs of the times and to diversify their portfolio of product offerings. And yes, believe it or not, a company that created killer weapons also created the delicate, the pretty, the colorful button implement. So we are going to talk about the history. We're going to talk about the identification. I will show you some of my collection of Colt buttons. I have maybe, I'm going to say, another 15 to 20 different designs that are not on the tray today. I simply took out one of my trays and decided this is what I'm going to show you, simply, honestly, because it has a really good variety of color in it. But I do have other Colt buttons. They made, I'm talking about hundreds of different designs. And what they did with those designs is they would take a single design and create a rainbow of colors of that same exact design. And I actually have a couple of those examples in this tray so that you can see that, you know, if you find the red hat swirly design in red, well, guess what? They also have it in black. They also created different sizes of the same exact button. So it should be relatively easy, and especially for beginner collectors, I always say start with the Colt plastic buttons. First of all, it's a great area to get into because a lot of people don't realize what they are. A lot of people, of course, have absolutely zero knowledge that a firearms company such as Colt, which is still iconic today, you know, created something like a button. You know, if you think about it, you would think that they would make something else, such as maybe even tools. But no, they decided to go into, and really it wasn't that they were going into the button business. They went into the plastics business. So they initially started creating plastics for the pharmaceutical companies, plastics that would hold things. So what could those things be? Anything from petroleum jelly to, you know, some sort of face cream or a medication, obviously. And the name of their plastic, their polymer, if you will, is Coltrock. So Coltrock. Just like a company like Colt, to add the word rock, meaning it's hard, it's sturdy, it will stand the test of time, and it does, because they stopped making these buttons in about the late 30s. They began making them in the 1920s. So after a while, you know, they stopped making them. Why? Because this sounds horrible, and it is what it is. It's part of history. It's part of manufacturing. Other companies could make them a lot cheaper. Now, these were inexpensive buttons to begin with. So imagine, you know, especially if it's a country like China, Japan, etc., even other American companies, they could make them, you know, much cheaper, much quicker, in larger quantities. You know, they weren't set up to be a company that created weaponry. They were initially, you know, those companies set themselves up to make things such as buttons and other small plastics. So what Colt had to do is, you know, they decided to create a division. And luckily for them, of course, they already had the workforce. They had the compound and all the land and machinery and machine operators and people who could actually create and modify their machines to, you know, come up with a brand new industry, something that they never probably thought in 100 years that they would be into. And at that point, it's almost 200 years. But it worked. Why? Because so many other companies were going into the plastics industry. It was a very large, very lucrative industry. Even today, in the year 2020, going on to 2021 soon, people just don't realize the billions upon billions, trillions made in the plastic industry. So getting, on into the sign of the times as Colt did, what they decided to do is, come up with designs that were fun, they were funky, they were super colorful. They created colors that range from earth tones to pastels to, of course, those favorite primary colors. The most desired colors in Colt to collect are two of my favorite colors, and I have several favorite colors, but are the oranges and especially the purples. The purples are the absolute hardest to find. So if you find purples, you find orange, maybe that's an area of collecting that you decide to get into. Believe it or not, gray was another color that was not overly produced and also not easy to find. So, how many people collect gray buttons? Obviously not a lot, but if you find them in a Colt, especially in something that's not what we, as kids, we used to call this the cat eye design. This design right here. And this particular design of button, they made every single color that they could possibly produce in this design. But gray in this button is easier to find, but gray in any other style of button they created is harder to find. But like I said, the purples, oranges, and yes, we have to throw that obligatory gray on there as well. The most popular colors: white, brown, blues, black, red. Very, very popular. The blues, of course, they did an array of blues. So everything from the light blue to the primary blues. As you can see, I have some of those on this tray. Let me push this one up so you can see it a little bit better. And also in regards to color is, there are people that just like to collect a certain color in Colt, a certain design in Colt. Like you could be really sort of original to yourself and your personality when it comes to a Colt button. And that's something that I really like about their collection. They also had, some things that they created, and I'm just going to talk about one of them, which is, some people they ask the question, is it a button or is it actually a container? Well, I have the answer for you. What I'm going to show you in a moment is both a button, a container, and bonus, it's also a pin. So this is one of my dream finds. I've never had one. It's on my dream list of I wish I had it Colt buttons. So full disclosure, this is a photo from Pinterest. And the lady, she's under Pegs, P-E-G-S, on Pinterest. If you wanted to take a look-see at this and get a little more information, but my goodness, is she lucky. She has every color of the rainbow here, plus more, as far as these Colt cameos. That is what they were called. What it was is it had a lady, that's why they're calling it a cameo, on top. And of course, this is made 100% from start to finish from the Coltrock plastic. And what would happen is you would twist the top off, and the top being where you could see the face. And underneath, there is a little area, a pot, if you will, where they would have cosmetics. So rouges, lipsticks, whatever type of cosmetic, maybe even a little bit of powder in there. And then you would screw the top back on after you perked yourself up and got all spicy again. And it would then be either something that was sewn on your clothing as a button, or it would attach as a pin. So not the classic brooch type pin, or obviously a real cameo pin, but one of those with this, what we call the sling. We have different names for things, but we call it like a sling back pin. It's like where you would stab yourself by accident continuously because there was no protection for it. I'll show you an example of what the back looks like. So this is the back. So there's a pin in here and it slings out, comes down, has a pointy end down this way that you could, put into your clothing to hold it on there. And as a lady, men would be zero the wiser, obviously, as you walked around with this pretty little piece of color on your clothing. And as you can't see as well in this picture, but I'll show you another. But this is the shank up here for the button portion of it. So it could actually be sewn on clothing, and you could actually remove this piece of it. And as you can see, this actually says patent pending. It has a number down here. That was one of the things that I guess I'll even use the word frustrates most Colt collectors is Colt as an organization did not put their name, did not put a patent number on all of the buttons that they made. It's such an irritation overall in the button world, regardless of whoever the maker or designer was. The reason why is we all kind of want to go to that item, pick it up, and say, oh, that was made by company Acme XYZ. And with the Colt buttons, it's really hard to do. This is just my opinion as to why a lot of their items, as far as buttons go, are unmarked and or have zero patent information on them. I think when you're a firearm company, years later, whether it be decades, 100 years later, folks, being confused or either, sort of saying, wait a minute, you were like the top firearm company in the United States, maybe even the world, who knows? And then you started making pretty colorful buttons. So, was there a little bit in Colt, manly company, ran by men, etc. Was it a little bit of button shaming maybe going on, or, pastel color shaming, plastic shaming? I don't know. Like I said, that's just my opinion, but I find it very odd that very few of their items have a patent number or even have the word Colt on them. There's only one button that has the word Colt on it, and I don't have that button. And just to show you one more picture of that beautiful cameo button, this is what it looks like without the pinning neck mechanism on it. So you could see the shank here and the hole, obviously, for your thread. And this is what it looks like in 3 parts. Now, this top part should not be detached. It was never made to be detached, but apparently it's detached. Actually, that's not true. The top part is made to be detached because underneath is where you would see this pot. So you're seeing this in 3 pieces, but realistically, this is a 2-piece button, if you will, cosmetic container. You would have this part and this part. And what the photographer did is added this picture of it all together, just, for clarity. But absolutely amazing. This is one of my dream wish items. Hopefully I find it soon because I would love to have 4 or 5 in different colors. And I am that type of person. I would have definitely I would wear this, these pieces. Some of them I wear as pins, depends on the color. And the others definitely would be sewn on to clothing, a jacket, even a hat. I think it would be such a cool hat accent versus the classic flower or the classic, let's just say, feather. Because poor birds. I love birds. So everyone should maybe have a question in their mind. Why did Colt stop making buttons? I'll give you 1 second. There you go. The reason why, it's actually really sad. War. War came along and weaponry was needed again. So you get out of the plastics, unless it's for something industrial. You get out of making buttons, if you will, and then you move on to more pressing matters. And after that, they never really went back to making buttons. So at the end of the day, there's something that you should know, though. There are millions upon millions. I believe they made well over 4 to 6 million buttons. So there are a lot. Like I said, the cool thing, for example, this yellow button is the same design as this light blue button. So that's the great thing, and I mentioned that before, whereas you have a variety of colors. So they were able to put out a lot in a short period of time. They didn't have to be in existence for hundreds of years to create a lot of different designs, a lot of different colors that are still out there today. A lot of people come across these buttons and they have no idea of the history of them, which is not their fault, because why? As I stated already, the hallmarking on them just doesn't exist for a lot of them. But the way that people have identified them is through salesman samples. So they would create these salesman sample boards, sort of like people do today when they create their cardboard displays with different types of buttons on them. And what they would do is take one of every design that they had, and they would put each of those designs in a different color so they can also show off their color range. And a lot of those actually survived the test of time. And this is still a building. They don't make them there anymore, but their building was in Hartford, Connecticut. And in Connecticut, they actually had a dedicated building to doing nothing but creating buttons and plastics. And for example, that cameo container pin, if you will, had triple purpose. Those were created at this particular building. And just a tiny bit of history about this building location. And you can see it says Original Plastics Division, and this is part of the Colt compound. They had a ridiculous number of buildings that were in this particular area of Hartford, Connecticut, and they still exist today. They have been refurbished, and some of them actually, the refurbishing was funded by the Parks Foundation for the United States. I know because I actually worked in the Sawtooth building, which was a building where they actually but they tested shooting the firearms. So they would stand at one end and shoot down towards the other end. So when our building was being refurbished, they had to pull there were old bullets and casings and things that they had to pick up or either take out of the timbers. And the buildings look nothing like what you see in the photo today. This building, I believe, actually houses apartments as well as definitely studios. I actually worked for a television studio that used to be a Colt building itself in this area. So you can go there today, especially if you decide to go through the state of Connecticut because you're on a tour or you're on your way somewhere else. It's definitely worth stopping just to have a quick drive around, take a couple pictures, because it is amazing, like what they were able to do to save these buildings and not only refurbish them, but find new peaceful usages for them. So is Colt still in business today? Yes. Is their plastics division still in business today? Yes. But the plastic division is owned by someone totally different. It's not, you know, a Colt company anymore. And it is very small. So the building is not this big hulking mass that you see here. And also this building, you're seeing part of the front of it, but it goes all the way back beyond where this picture is showing you. So I had to change my setup a little bit so that we can have a white background so that hopefully the lighting comes through better for you. But we're going to take a little look at some of the buttons that I have. Like I said, this is, I believe I must have another 15 to 20 different designs. And I have even more in various colors. They're repeats of the same design, just obviously different colors. So let's talk about this is more of a lilac than it is a purple, but like I said, their rarest colors are the purples, and this is one that I like because it's just so sweet. It reminds me of like the 1930s, that innocence of the time. And one of the things that you have to do with their buttons is definitely look at the backs to see how they're made. They have a few different ways of making them, and you can see that little indent right in there for your string to lay across. That's a classic thing with their buttons. And like I said, the way that most of these have ever been identified is by the salesman samples that are out there, and there is a bevy of information and a crazy number of collectors out there that are generous enough to put their information as far as what they found on Pinterest. There's a lot, and there are some websites as well that you could go to. I don't know if there's any Colt Facebook groups. Button Facebook groups. I never looked for that. I'll have to do that, but there might be. And, you know, even up to today, someone might discover a new salesman sample card that no one has ever seen with a few new buttons on it that none of us have ever discovered. And we could possibly have in our collection, or maybe we had them in our collection. So you definitely, you know, want to be on the lookout and see that classic back two button or two hole design with a little divot in the center. And look at this. That's another thing that I need to show you really quick. Let me see. I will take this tiny blue one. You could see they made various sizes. So that's the other thing. Various sizes, various colors of the same button style. So there's a lot out there. But like I said, I'm sure that there are some that people are probably discovering right now. I do think a lot of them have been discovered, but it's possible that, like I said, there's a few outliers out there. Something to be knowledgeable of, because that's just the way of the world. And it didn't start in the 90s or the years 2000 on, but fakes, you know, have been on the market for a very long time. And this is a good example of that. Which one of these do you believe? And I don't know if you see it well enough, and I will actually get a tighter view on that for you. And pull the camera back. Oh my God, I'm doing real camera work here, which is scary for me. So which one of these do you believe is the Colt Plastics button? Is it this one? This is actually a green. I know you can't probably see it as well. Let me see if I hold it up, if that helps. This is a green. It's sort of a evergreen, a dark green color. It's actually really pretty green. And this is what I call the classic red, sort of like, you know, the red of a crayon. So did you guess? Which one is it? All right, enough time. So the one that is not the authentic button is not that one. This is your authentic button. I was trying to be tricky. Okay, so how do you know that this is an actual Colt firearm button? Number one, this button has been identified by lots of Colt collectors. Number two, notice the ridges. The ridges are on all four sides of the square. Also, the two holes are perfectly centered at the X point in the square where it dents in. Also, as we've already discussed, you need to take a look at the back. Notice how the back looks with the two holes, a little divot in the center. And then if you take a look at this button, it has no ridges. The holes are actually put at a diamond angle versus being perfectly, you know, in the middle of the square. They're at a diamond angle, like I said, and I hope you, yep, you can see that easily, no ridges. And then if you turn it around and look at the back, this is what the back looks like. Now, it's an attempt to look very Colty like, but this is not a Colt button. Also, you guys can't do this, but if you touch this button and you touch a Colt button because they use their Coltrock formula, you can immediately feel the difference. If you drop them on a table, you can also hear the difference. So those are just things that you learn over time. This is another example. And just take a look at these. Of two buttons, and one is a Colt button and one is not a Colt button. So you have this button, and both of them are brown. I know in the camera they sort of look black. Well, one looks black, one looks brown, and we'll actually move these two out of the way. And let's try to straighten that up for you and get a little more color in there if I can. I think that's as good as it's going to get. So this is a darker, richer like this is a yummy chocolate brown, like the milk chocolate you would eat. And this is a lighter color chocolate brown as well. Both are very smooth. Both are well-made buttons. And then if you flip them over, so this one, if I can hold it with my little, there you go, tweezers. This one looks like that on the back. So you see that shank that's sort of similar to what we saw in that cameo button. And then you have this one that looks like this on the back. And you can see it has like this, the shank, and then there's a line to the left and the right side of that, which is part of the plastic molding process. So which one of these, is it this one or is it this one, is the authentic Colt button? It is this one. So how do you know? Well, you know because Colt, when they made the buttons like this, and you even saw this on the cameo, you always see the molding marks to the left and the right side of the shank. Now this little piece that's here is just the metal from where it hung on the card. Disregard that. But if you move that over, you will also see that it has a little bit of a molding mark right there, which is obviously partially a design thing. Actually, let me try to take this off. I should have taken it off earlier, but I have no production, and as you guys know, I have very few resources to create these videos because I don't have my 1,000 subscribers yet, so please subscribe. So you can see the little molding mark right there, but for them, this is really where your string would go through, whereas if you look at this one, you'll see that that is not a molding mark. It's just like where they didn't take this piece off and make it flat. So you can see the quality of the design in this lighter brown chocolate button. So I will do one more video on Colt where I am simply going to go through and show you some of the buttons in my collection. That will be in the very next video. So this is a Colt part 1 of 2, so that you guys can finally go out there, and when you find plastic buttons, you will not be irritated or frustrated, because now you know that there's a cool, very collectible design out there by this company, or various designs out there by this company that are definitely desired by buyers. The only thing is, I noticed that when people sell them and when people buy them, unless they're doing it for like a competition and they just need 1 or 2 more, they usually like buying a variety of colors and a variety of designs in one lot. But they want all of them to be Colt buttons. So thank you guys for tuning in. Like I said, part 2 of this video series of the Colt buttons anyway, the very next video is going to be me showing you some of the buttons in my design so that you can go break out your buttons, and especially the ones you thought were junk buttons, and see if you have any in there. Remember that your health is your wealth. Without your health, you have absolutely nothing. So please take care of yourselves and subscribe to the channel.